He walked through the door at 6 a.m., smelling like another woman's perfume and stale whiskey, expecting his wife to be asleep in their bed like the good, obedient doll he thought she was. He expected silence. He expected forgiveness. But what Dante Russo found on the marble kitchen island wasn't breakfast. It was a wedding ring, a set of signed divorce papers, and a single note that would bring the most feared mafia don in New York to his knees. He thought he ruled the city, but he was about to realize that for the last 5 years, he hadn't been living with a housewife. He had been sleeping next to a mastermind, and she didn't just leave, she took everything. The early morning sun was just beginning to bleed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse overlooking Central Park, casting long, sharp shadows across the Italian marble floors. The city below was waking up, but inside the sprawling residence of Dante Russo, the silence was deafening. Dante stumbled slightly as he keyed the code into the private elevator. The heavy steel doors slid open with a soft hiss. He stepped out, loosening the silk tie that felt like a noose around his neck. His head pounded with the rhythmic thud of a hangover, mixed with the lingering adrenaline of a night spent in the VIP room of the Obsidian, a club owned by the rival Genovese family. He reeked of it, the scent of heavy musk, cigar smoke, and the distinct, cloying sweetness of jasmine perfume that certainly didn't belong to his wife. "Serafina!" he called out, his voice raspy. He expected the soft patter of her slippers. He expected her to appear from the hallway, eyes downcast, perhaps holding a glass of water and aspirin, asking no questions. That was who Serafina was. Quiet. Dutiful. The perfect mafia wife who looked the other way. There was no answer. Dante frowned, tossing his suit jacket onto the velvet armchair in the foyer. "Serafina, don't play games. I have a headache that could kill a horse." He walked into the kitchen, expecting the smell of fresh espresso. Serafina always had the machine running by 5:30 a.m. But the machine was cold. The sleek granite counters were empty, devoid of the usual clutter of her morning routine. No half-read romance novel, no cup of tea, no fresh flowers in the crystal vase. Instead, there was just one object sitting in the direct center of the island, a thick manila envelope. Dante paused, his instincts flaring. He was a man who lived by the gun and the deal. He knew when something was wrong. The air in the penthouse felt stale, as if no one had breathed it for hours. He walked over to the island, his leather shoes clicking loudly on the stone. He reached out and picked up the envelope. It was heavy. Next to it, catching the morning light, sat a diamond ring. The ring. A 5-carat solitaire diamond that had cost him more than most people earned in a lifetime. It sat there, abandoned, looking like a piece of cold glass. Dante's stomach dropped. A cold sweat broke over his skin, instantly sobering him up. He ripped the envelope open. Petition for dissolution of marriage. The bold black letters seemed to mock him. He stared at the legal jargon, his brain struggling to process the reality. Divorce? Serafina? It was laughable. Serafina was an orphan he had picked out of a crumbling estate in Sicily. She had no family, no money, and no connections. She was entirely dependent on him. In his world, wives didn't leave. They endured, or they died. "Is this a joke?" he muttered, his anger rising, masking the sudden spike of fear in his chest. "Serafina, get out here!" He stormed toward the master bedroom, kicking the door open. The bed was made. Not just made. It was pristine, military tight. It looked like no one had slept in it. He ripped open the walk-in closet, ready to drag her out and demand an explanation for this childish stunt. He froze. Her side of the closet was bare. It wasn't just that her clothes were gone. It was surgically clean. The hangers were gone. The shoe racks were empty. The vanity where she kept her jewelry, the necklaces he bought her as apologies for missed anniversaries, the bracelets he gave her when he stayed out too late, was cleared out. She hadn't just left for the night. She had erased herself. "Lucas!" Dante roared, grabbing his phone and dialing his head of security. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. "Boss?" Lucas's voice was groggy. "Where is my wife?" Dante barked, pacing the empty room. "The security detail. Who was watching the penthouse last night?" That would be Miller and Caleb, boss. They're stationed at the lobby and the service entrance." "Why? Is everything okay?" "She's gone, you idiot. The house is empty. Call them, now." Dante hung up and threw the phone onto the mattress. He ran his hands through his dark hair, pacing like a caged tiger. This was impossible. The building was a fortress. Retinal scanners, 24-hour armed guards, cameras in every hallway. No one left the Russo penthouse without being seen. His phone buzzed. It was a text message. Not from Lucas. It was from an unknown number. He opened it. It was a video file. Dante's thumb hovered over the screen. His heart hammered against his ribs. He pressed play. The video showed the interior of the Obsidian, the club he had been at last night. The camera angle was high, likely security footage. It showed Dante in the VIP booth. It showed the woman, a strikingly beautiful blonde in a red dress, sliding onto his lap. It showed his hand resting on her waist. It showed him leaning in, whispering in her ear, laughing as she kissed his neck. Then the video cut to black. Text appeared on the screen. "I hope she was worth half the empire, Dante." Dante stared at the phone, his blood running cold. "Half the empire," he whispered. He rushed back to the living room and tore through the rest of the documents in the manila envelope. Under the divorce papers, there was a stack of financial transfers. Transfer of ownership, Russo Shipping Logistics, 49% share. Transfer of ownership, the Emerald Casino, 51% share. Asset liquidation, Cayman, accounts 4, 5, and 8. The timestamps were from 3 hours ago. Dante felt his knees give way. He slumped against the kitchen island. These weren't just accounts. These were the fronts, the clean businesses that washed the family's dirty money. And the Cayman accounts, only 2 people had the access codes. Him and his lawyer, Benedict. "Benedict," Dante hissed. He grabbed his phone again and dialed the family lawyer. It went straight to voicemail. "You've reached the voicemail of Benedict Thorne. I am currently on an extended sabbatical and will not be returning calls. Please direct all inquiries regarding the Russo estate to my successor, Miss Serafina Russo." Dante hurled the phone across the room. It smashed into the 85-inch television, shattering the screen. "No!" he screamed, the sound tearing from his throat. She hadn't just left him. She hadn't just divorced him. She had executed a hostile takeover of his life while he was busy cheating on her with a woman whose name he couldn't even remember. The elevator chimed again. Dante spun around, reaching for the gun he usually kept taped under the kitchen counter, but it was gone. The doors opened, and Lucas, his head of security, ran in, looking pale and terrified. Behind him were 2 other guards, weapons drawn. "Boss, we checked the tapes," Lucas panted, holstering his weapon when he saw the room was empty. "The cameras, they were looped." "Looped?" Dante growled, his eyes murderous. "From 10 p.m. last night until 4 a.m. this morning. The footage just shows the hallway being empty, but the logs show the service elevator was used at 11:30 p.m. "Who used it?" Lucas swallowed hard. "It was authorized by you, boss." "I was at the club. The authorization came from your biometric override, your fingerprint and retinal scan." Dante looked at his own hands. He had been passed out drunk around 11:30 p.m. Or so he thought. Had someone come to the club? Had they taken his print while he was unconscious? "And the car?" Dante asked, his voice dangerously low. "Did you take a car?" "No, boss," Lucas said, looking at the floor. "A car came for her." "What car?" "A Rolls-Royce Phantom. Blacked-out windows. Diplomatic plates." Dante froze. Diplomatic plates meant untouchable. It meant power that exceeded standard law enforcement. It meant someone higher up the food chain than a standard mob boss. "Who was inside?" "We couldn't see," Lucas admitted. "But the driver, One of the guys at the gate said he recognized him. Who? It was Silas. Dante stumbled back as if he'd been punched. Silas? My brother? No, boss, Lucas whispered. Silas. The hitman, we thought, died in the warehouse fire 3 years ago. The ghost. Dante leaned against the counter, the room spinning. Silas was the most lethal enforcer the Russo family had ever known. He had vanished 3 years ago, presumed dead after a deal went wrong. Dante had mourned him. Serafina had cried at his empty casket funeral, and now his dead best friend had just driven his wife away in a diplomatic Rolls-Royce, while Dante was busy cheating on her. Dante looked down at the divorce papers again. He flipped to the last page. At the bottom, next to Serafina's elegant, flowing signature, there was a small post-it note with a handwritten message. I gave you 5 years to love me, Dante. You gave me 5 years of loneliness. Now I'm taking my time back. Don't come looking for me. The person you're looking for never existed. Dante crushed the note in his fist. A dark, primal growl rose in his chest. The hangover was gone, replaced by a cold, burning rage. Lucas, Dante said, his voice void of all emotion. Yes, boss? Shut down the city. Close the ports. Ground the private jets. Call the captains. I want every street corner in New York watched. Boss, if she has diplomatic cover. I don't care if she has the Pope driving her, Dante roared, slamming his fist onto the marble, cracking the stone. She is my wife, and nobody steals from Dante Russo. He walked over to the window, looking out at the city that suddenly felt like a prison. Find her, he whispered to the glass. Find her, so I can ask her why. But deep down, as he stared at his reflection, Dante knew the answer, he just didn't want to admit it. He had created a monster. And now the monster was free. The war room of the Russo crime family was usually a place of calculated silence and smoke-filled strategy. Located in the basement of a nondescript meatpacking warehouse in the meatpacking district, it was soundproof, bomb-proof, and sweep-proof. But today, the air inside vibrated with the chaotic frequency of panic. Dante Russo sat at the head of the mahogany table, his Brioni suit jacket discarded, his white dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar to reveal the sheen of sweat on his neck. He hadn't slept. The hangover had been replaced by a sharp, adrenaline-fueled clarity that felt like shards of glass in his brain. Around him sat his 3 remaining capos. Dominic, a brute of a man who ran the docks, Leo, who handled the unions, and Felix, a nervous younger man who managed the cybersecurity and laundering operations. Tell me something I don't know, Dante slammed his hand on the table, making Felix flinch. Tell me how a woman who spent her days arranging hydrangeas and shopping at Bergdorf Goodman managed to liquidate $300 million in 4 hours. Felix adjusted his glasses, his fingers trembling as he tapped on his laptop. Boss, it's the codes, the Swift codes for the Cayman accounts. They weren't just accessed, they were rewritten. Rewritten? Dante narrowed his eyes. By who? By an administrator, Felix whispered. Look, I tracked the digital footprint. The login didn't come from an outside hacker. It came from inside the penthouse. IP address matches the master bedroom. Dante felt a phantom punch to his gut. Serafina doesn't know how to code. She barely knows how to use the smart TV. With all due respect, boss, Dominic grunted, leaning forward. Maybe she played you. The quiet ones? They're the ones watching when you're not looking. Dante glared at Dominic, ready to snap, but the truth hung heavy in the room. He thought back to the nights he'd come home late, drunk or smelling of another woman. Serafina would be sitting in the living room, reading. He always assumed she was reading romance novels. But what if she had been reading his files? What if the dumb orphan act was a mask? The lawyer, Dante said, his voice dropping an octave. Benedict. He's the key. He had the other half of the keys. Benedict is gone, Leo said, tossing a folder onto the table. We sent a team to his brownstone in the Upper East Side. Cleaned out. Neighbors say he left 2 days ago. Said he was going on a spiritual retreat to Bali. He's not in Bali, Dante growled. He's with her. Just then, the heavy steel door of the war room buzzed. Lucas entered, looking grimmer than he had at the penthouse. He was holding a rusted metal box. "Boss," Lucas said, walking over to the table. "We tore the penthouse apart like you asked. We checked the vents, the floorboards, everything. And we found this behind the false wall in the guest bathroom. The one you use for the emergency cash stash," Dante frowned. He knew that stash. He checked it monthly. "I didn't put a metal box in there." "I know," Lucas said, "because the keypad to open the wall panel, the combination was changed. We had to drill it." Dante took the box. It was old, military grade. He popped the latch. Inside, there was no money, no jewelry, just a stack of photographs and a single leather-bound journal. Dante picked up the first photo. The room went silent. The photo was grainy, black and white, likely taken with a long-range surveillance lens. It showed a younger Serafina, maybe 18 years old, standing on a pier in Sicily. She wasn't wearing the designer dresses Dante clothed her in. She was wearing tactical gear, cargo pants, a tight tank top, and combat boots. And she wasn't alone. Standing next to her, with his arm draped familiarly over her shoulder, was Silas, the hitman, the ghost. But it was the way they looked at each other that made Dante's blood freeze. It wasn't friendly. It was intimate, possessive. Dante flipped to the next photo. It showed Serafina at a shooting range, holding a sniper rifle with perfect form. The next showed her sitting at a table with men Dante recognized, rival dons from the European syndicates. She wasn't an orphan, Dante whispered, the realization crashing into him like a freight train. She was a plant. He opened the leather journal. The first page had a date, 5 years ago, the day he met her. Entry 1, target acquired. Dante Russo is arrogant, careless, and emotionally stunted. He believes he is saving me. This will be easier than father predicted. The infiltration begins tonight. Dante read the words, his breath hitching. Target. She had called him a target. Every smile, every touch, every time she whispered that she loved him, it was a mission. She played the long game, Felix murmured, looking at the photos over Dante's shoulder. 5 years deep cover. That's CIA-level patience. Dante slammed the book shut. The betrayal was no longer just about a marriage. It was about his ego. He prided himself on being the smartest man in the room. He prided himself on being a predator. But for 5 years, he had been sleeping next to the hunter. "Lucas," Dante commanded, standing up. "The Rolls-Royce. You said Silas was driving. Where did it go?" "We tracked it via traffic cams until it hit the Holland Tunnel," Lucas reported. "Then it vanished. Probably switched plates or cars inside the tunnel. But boss, we got a hit on the facial recognition from a gas station in New Jersey about 20 minutes ago. Who? Not Serafina. Silas. He was buying water and a pregnancy test." The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear the hum of the server fans in the corner. Dante stared at Lucas. "Say that again." "A pregnancy test, boss." Dante's hand went to his stomach. He felt sick. Serafina had told him she couldn't have children. They had tried for 2 years. Doctors said it was stress. She had cried in his arms when the tests came back negative. Was that a lie, too? Or was she pregnant now? And if she was, whose was it? A vision of the video from last night flashed in his mind. Him with the blonde at the club. Then the note, "I gave you 5 years." If she was pregnant with his child, and he had been out cheating while she was packing to leave. "Get the car," Dante said, his voice trembling with a mix of fury and something that felt dangerously like heartbreak. "We're going to New Jersey." "Boss, it's a trap," Dominic warned. "Silas is the best killer we've ever seen. If he let himself be seen on a camera, he wanted you to see him." "I know," Dante said, checking the clip of his 9mm pistol and sliding it into his waistband. He wants me to come. He wants to finish what we started 3 years ago." Dante looked around the room at his men. "If I don't come back tonight, burn everything. The accounts are gone anyway. If I can't have the Empire, nobody does." He walked out of the war room. The image of Serafina with a sniper rifle burned into his retinas. He didn't know who his wife was, but he was going to find out, even if he had to burn down the entire tri-state area to do it. The drive to New Jersey was a blur of rain and grey highway. Dante sat in the back of the armored SUV, staring at the leather journal he had taken from the safe. He hadn't read past the first page yet. He was afraid of what else was in there. But as they crossed the bridge, curiosity won. He flipped to the middle of the book, entry 412, Year 3. Dante is becoming reckless. The deal with the cartel was sloppy. I had to fix the ledger while he was asleep to prevent the IRS from flagging the Emerald Casino. He thinks he's a genius businessman. He doesn't realize I've been double-entry bookkeeping his entire life to keep him out of prison. I'm not doing it for him anymore. I'm doing it for the leverage. Dante's jaw tightened. She had been saving him? All those times he thought he had narrowly escaped an audit or a raid. It wasn't luck. It was her. The dutiful housewife had been running his empire better than he had. "Boss, we're coming up on the coordinates," Lucas said from the front seat. "It's an old industrial park, abandoned textile factory. Looks like a kill box." "Park a block away," Dante ordered. "We go in on foot." The SUV rolled to a stop behind a rusted shipping container. The rain was coming down hard now, washing away the grime of the city, but doing nothing for the grime on Dante's soul. He stepped out, the cold rain soaking his shirt instantly. He signaled for his team, Lucas and 2 other enforcers, to fan out. They moved silently through the wet asphalt, weapons raised. The factory loomed ahead, a skeleton of brick and broken glass. There was a single light on in the loading bay. Dante moved toward it, his heart hammering against his ribs. He didn't care about the money anymore. He didn't care about the cheating. He needed to see her face. He needed to know if the last 5 years were entirely a lie, or if there was a moment, just 1 second, where she actually loved him. He reached the loading bay doors. They were slightly ajar. He kicked the door open and leveled his gun. "Serafina!" The space was empty, save for a single folding table and a chair in the center of the vast concrete room. On the table sat a laptop, open and glowing. "Clear the perimeter," Lucas shouted to the other guards. Dante walked slowly towards the table. As he got closer, the screen on the laptop flickered. It was a video call, active and waiting. He stepped into the frame. The screen brightened. Serafina was there. She was sitting in what looked like the cabin of a private jet. She wasn't wearing the modest pastel clothes she wore at the penthouse. She was wearing a sharp black blazer, her hair slicked back, wearing red lipstick that looked like war paint. She looked powerful, lethal. "Hello, Dante," she said. Her voice was cool, detached. It lacked the warmth he was used to. "Where are you?" Dante demanded, gripping the edge of the table. "Turn the plane around, Serafina. We can talk about this." She let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Talk. We had 5 years to talk, Dante. You preferred to listen to the sound of your own voice." "I made a mistake," Dante said, his voice cracking. "Last night. It was a mistake." "Last night wasn't a mistake, Dante. It was a cliché," she countered, taking a sip of champagne. "But don't worry. I didn't leave because you slept with a stripper. I left because the job is done." "The job?" Dante asked. "What job?" "Look under the table." Dante hesitated, then reached under the metal table. He felt something taped to the underside. He pulled it loose. It was a thick, black binder. He threw it on the table and opened it. His eyes widened. It was a dossier, a complete, detailed list of every bribe Dante had ever paid to judges, every hit he had ordered, every illegal shipment of arms. It included dates, times, GPS coordinates, and bank transfer receipts. "The Black Ledger," Serafina said softly. "You spent 10 years building a criminal empire. I spent 5 years documenting it." "You're a Fed?" Dante whispered, horror dawning on him. "You're a rat?" "Worse," she smiled, and the cruelty in it was breathtaking. "I'm a Viltore." Dante staggered back. The Viltore family. The ancient Sicilian bloodline that the Russo family had wiped out 20 years ago in the Night of Long Knives. Dante's father had ordered the hit. They thought they had killed them all. "You're dead," Dante stammered. "The Viltore are dead." "Not all of them," Serafina said. "My father survived long enough to tell me who burned our home, who killed my mother. He told me to find the Russo heir, to make him fall in love with me, to make him dependent on me, and then to destroy him." Silas, Dante realized. Silas knew? "Silas was my father's bodyguard before he was yours," she revealed. "He never worked for you, Dante. He was my handler." Dante looked at the woman on the screen, the woman he had woken up next to for 1,000 mornings, the woman whose hair he had stroked. She was an assassin sent to kill his life, not his body. "So what now?" Dante asked, raising the Black Ledger. "You turn this into the FBI? You send me to jail?" "Oh no," Serafina shook her head. "Prison is too easy for you. And besides, I don't work with the police." She leaned into the camera. "I sold it." Dante froze. "You what?" "I sold the ledger, and the shipping routes, and the casino shares." "To who?" Dante screamed. "To the Kovac syndicate," she said calmly. Dante's blood turned to ice. Victor Kovac was a butcher. He was the Russo family's sworn enemy. If Kovac had the ledger, he had the map to dismantle the Russo organization piece by piece. He wouldn't use the law. He would use bombs. "Run, Dante," Serafina whispered. "Victor knows where you are. He knows you're at the factory. I told him." Dante looked up at Lucas, panic surging. "We have to go, now! Boom!" The explosion rocked the building. The front entrance of the factory blew inward, showering them with debris. Gunfire erupted from the darkness outside, heavy automatic fire. "It's an ambush!" Lucas screamed, returning fire blindly into the rain. On the screen, Serafina watched the chaos unfold. She didn't look happy. She didn't look sad. She looked like a judge delivering a sentence. "Goodbye, husband," she said. The screen went black. Dante grabbed the Black Ledger and ducked as bullets chewed up the concrete wall behind him. He had been stripped of his money, his wife, and his pride, and now he was trapped in a kill box by his worst enemy. He pulled his gun, his teeth bared in a snarl. Serafina wanted him dead. She wanted to see him destroyed. "Not today, sweetheart," he grunted, firing back into the smoke. "Not today." The ambush at the textile factory wasn't a battle. It was an execution attempt. Bullets shredded the air, turning the loading dock into a slaughterhouse of flying concrete and sparks. Dante was pinned behind a rusted forklift, the deafening roar of automatic weapons fire drowning out his own thoughts. "Boss, we can't hold them!" Lucas screamed, clutching his left shoulder. Blood was seeping through his fingers, dark and thick against his white shirt. The other 2 guards were already down, motionless bodies on the wet pavement. Dante checked his magazine. 3 rounds, 3 bullets against an army of Kovac's mercenaries. He looked at the Black Ledger in his hand. It was the reason they were dying. But it was also the only leverage he had left. If Kovac wanted this book, he wouldn't blow the whole building unless he already had a copy. "We move," Dante grunted, grabbing Lucas by his good arm. "The drainage pipe in the north corner. It feeds into the river." "That grate is welded shut," Lucas wheezed, his face pale. "Not anymore," Dante said, pointing to an oxygen tank strapped to the side of the forklift. Dante raised his gun, took a breath, and fired 2 precise shots. One hit the mercenary advancing on their left. The second hit the valve of the oxygen tank. He shoved Lucas down just as the tank ruptured. It didn't explode like a bomb, but it turned into a missile, careening off the wall and smashing through the rusted iron grate of the drainage tunnel with a screeching tear of metal. "Go!" Dante roared. They scrambled into the darkness of the tunnel, sliding down the slime-covered concrete chute, just as a grenade detonated where they had been standing seconds before. The shock wave slammed them into the muck at the bottom, ringing their ears. But they were alive. They trudged through the knee-deep, freezing water for an hour, emerging under a bridge 3 miles away. The rain was still pouring, washing the blood and soot from Dante's face, but it couldn't wash away the humiliation. He dragged Lucas up the muddy bank and into an alleyway behind a closed diner. Dante slumped against the brick wall, his chest heaving. He checked his pockets. No phone. He had smashed it. No wallet. It was in his jacket in the car. No keys. He was Dante Russo. He owned half of Manhattan, and he didn't have a dime to make a payphone call. "Boss," Lucas whispered, sliding down the wall. "I think I'm checking out." "Shut up," Dante snapped, though his voice lacked its usual bite. He ripped a strip of fabric from his shirt and tied a tourniquet around Lucas's arm. "You don't die until I tell you to die." Dante looked around. He needed a car. He needed a doctor. But more importantly, he needed a place to think. Every safe house he owned was in that ledger. Serafina knew them all. The penthouse, the Hamptons estate, the loft in Tribeca. They would all be swarming with feds or Kovac's hitmen by now. He was compromised, totally and completely. "Think, Dante," he muttered to himself, hitting his head against the brick. "Think like a rat, not a king." He remembered a name. Frank the Wrench O'Malley. Frank wasn't a made man. He wasn't on the payroll. He was an old mechanic in Queens who used to fix Dante's father's cars back in the 80s. He was off the books. He was a ghost in the system because he never mattered enough to be documented. Serafina wouldn't know him. She focused on the assets, the power players. She wouldn't look twice at a retired grease monkey. Dante hot-wired a beat-up Honda Civic, parked behind the diner, a skill he hadn't used since he was 15, and shoved Lucas into the passenger seat. The drive to Queens was a nightmare. Every siren made Dante flinch. Every pair of headlights in the rearview mirror looked like a hit squad. When they finally pulled into the cluttered, junk-filled driveway of Frank's small house, Dante felt like he had aged 20 years in one night. He pounded on the door. Frank opened it, holding a baseball bat. He was in his 70s now, wearing a stained undershirt, his face lined with grease and age. He squinted at the soaking wet, bloodied man on his porch. "Dante?" Frank lowered the bat, his eyes widening. "Sweet Mary, kid. You look like hell." "I need help, Frank," Dante said, his voice breaking. It was the first time he had asked for help in his adult life. Frank ushered them in without a word. For the next 3 days, Dante existed in a fugue state. Frank patched Lucas up with veterinary supplies and whiskey. Dante slept on a cot in the garage, smelling of oil and gasoline. On the 4th day, Dante turned on the small television in Frank's workshop. The news was a continuous loop of the Russo family's destruction. Federal agents raided the Russo shipping yards early this morning, seizing millions in contraband. This follows the seizure of the Emerald Casino yesterday. Authorities are calling it the Russo collapse. Dante Russo, the head of the family, is currently missing and presumed dead following a shootout in New Jersey. The screen flashed a photo of Dante. It was his mugshot from 10 years ago. Then the anchor's tone changed. In related news, the Russo estate is being liquidated by the acting executor, Serafina Russo, who has filed for emergency protection. Mrs. Russo, pictured here leaving the federal courthouse, is reportedly cooperating with authorities. Dante leaned closer to the screen. There she was. Serafina. She was wearing a white coat, looking like an angel, surrounded by a sea of black umbrellas. She looked devastated. She was wiping a tear from her eye as she spoke to the press. "I just want my husband to do the right thing," she sobbed into the microphones. "If he's out there, please, Dante, turn yourself in." Dante threw a wrench at the TV, shattering the screen. "She's good," Frank whistled from the corner, wiping his hands on a rag. "She's real good. She's playing the grieving widow while she sells you down the river." "She's not selling me," Dante growled, pacing the small garage. "She's erasing me." He looked at his reflection in the side mirror of a dismantled Cadillac. The beard was coming in thick. His eyes were hollow, dark circles bruising the skin beneath them. He didn't look like a Don. He looked like a predator that had been starved. "She thinks I'm dead," Dante said softly. "Or she hopes I am." "What are you gonna do, kid?" Frank asked. "You got no money. You got no soldiers. The feds want you. The Kovacs want you. You're done." Dante turned to look at the old mechanic. A cold, terrifying calm settled over him. "I have one thing, Frank." "What's that?" "I know her. She thinks she fooled me for 5 years, and she did. But I watched her too. I know how she thinks. She's arrogant now. She thinks she won. She'll get careless." Dante walked over to the workbench and picked up a tire iron, weighing it in his hand. "She didn't kill me in the factory," Dante said. "That was her mistake. She left a loose end." He turned to Lucas, who was sitting up on the cot, looking pale but alive. "Can you walk?" Dante asked. "I can run if I have to, boss," Lucas replied, grit in his voice. "Good. We're not staying in New York. If Serafina is liquidating the assets, she's moving the money. And I know where the Viltori family used to bank before my father wiped them out." "Where?" "Switzerland," Dante said. "Geneva. She's going to wash the cash and disappear. We're going to be there when she lands." "How do we get to Geneva?" Frank asked. "You're on the no-fly list." Dante looked at the black ledger, which was sitting on the workbench. It was battered, water-stained, but legible. "I have names in here," Dante said, tapping the book. "Senators, judges, CIA directors, people my father owned, people who don't want this book to leak." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm going to make one phone call, and then I'm going to take back what's mine." 3 months later, the Villa d'Este on the shores of Lake Como was not just a hotel. It was a fortress of luxury. Tonight, the grounds were illuminated by thousands of fairy lights, reflecting off the black water of the lake. It was the annual Midsummer Gala, a charity event attended by European royalty, tech billionaires, and the kind of criminals who wore tuxedos instead of ski masks. Dante stood on the edge of the terrace, hidden in the shadows of a cypress tree. He was unrecognizable. He had shaved his head, leaving only a dark stubble. A thick, well-groomed beard covered his jaw. He wore a tuxedo that fit him perfectly, stolen from a dry cleaner in Milan 2 days ago. He wore a mask, a simple black Venetian domino mask that covered his eyes. He wasn't Dante Russo anymore. He was a ghost. "Target is in the ballroom." Lucas's voice crackled in Dante's earpiece. Lucas was positioned on the roof of the boathouse with a suppressed sniper rifle. "She's wearing emerald green. You can't miss her." "Is she alone?" Dante asked, scanning the crowd through the glass doors. "Negative. Silas is with her. He's scanning the room every 5 seconds. He's tight, boss. He's expecting trouble." "He should be," Dante whispered. Dante adjusted his cufflinks and stepped out of the shadows. He moved with the fluid grace of a man who belonged among the elite, grabbing a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. He blended in instantly. He made his way into the ballroom. The air smelled of expensive perfume and old money. A string quartet was playing Vivaldi. And then he saw her. Serafina. She was standing near the center of the room, laughing at something a French diplomat had said. She looked breathtaking. The emerald dress clung to her curves, the color matching her eyes. Her hair was loose, cascading down her back in waves. She looked free. She looked happy. It made Dante want to burn the building down. But then she turned slightly, and Dante froze in mid-step. The dress was cut to accommodate a bump, a very visible, very prominent baby bump. She was at least 6 months pregnant. The math hit Dante like a physical blow. 3 months since she left, plus 3 months prior. The night of the anniversary. The night he had stayed home. The night he hadn't cheated. The one night in the last year where they had actually been together. "Boss?" Lucas asked in his ear. "Status?" "She's pregnant," Dante whispered, his voice barely audible. "We knew that from the test Silas bought," Lucas said. "Take the shot, boss, or give me the order." "Stand down," Dante hissed. "Do not fire." Dante watched as Silas stepped up to her. The hitman placed a hand on the small of her back. Protective, intimate. He whispered something in her ear, and Serafina nodded, her hand resting instinctively on her stomach. A cold fury replaced the shock. Was it Silas's baby? Or was it his? And if it was his, was Silas planning to raise Dante's son as his own? Dante moved. He cut through the crowd like a shark through water. He waited until Serafina excused herself, heading toward the private terrace overlooking the lake for fresh air. Silas started to follow, but a waiter, paid by Dante 5 minutes ago, accidentally spilled a tray of drinks on him. Silas snarled, distracted for 10 seconds. That was all Dante needed. Serafina stepped out onto the balcony, inhaling the cool night air. She leaned against the stone railing, closing her eyes. "You shouldn't be drinking champagne in your condition," a deep voice said from the shadows. Serafina stiffened. She didn't turn around immediately. She recognized the voice. It was a voice she had listened to for 5 years. "I'm drinking sparkling water," she said calmly, though her knuckles turned white as she gripped the railing. "Hello, Dante." She turned slowly. She didn't look terrified. She looked resigned. Dante stepped into the light, removing his mask. "You look different," she said, her eyes scanning his scar, his beard, the hardness in his face. "Rougher." "Dying tends to change a man," Dante said, stepping closer. "But you look good, Serafina. Glowing, actually. Is that the joy of freedom? Or just the hormones?" He glanced pointedly at her stomach. Serafina placed a protective hand over her belly. "What do you want, Dante? Did you come to kill me? Silas is 10 feet away. You won't make it to the door." "I don't care about Silas," Dante said, closing the distance until he was inches from her. He could smell her jasmine perfume. It was intoxicating. It smelled like home and betrayal all at once. "I want to know one thing. Is it mine?" Serafina looked up at him, her eyes searching his. For a moment, the mask of the Viltori assassin slipped, and he saw the woman he thought he knew. "Does it matter?" she asked softly. "You're a dead man walking, Dante. You have no empire. You have no legacy. Even if this child is yours, he will never know your name. He will grow up knowing that the Russos were monsters who destroyed his mother's family. I didn't destroy your family," Dante snapped. "I was a child when the Night of Long Knives happened. I had nothing to do with it." "You benefited from it," Serafina hissed, her anger flaring. "Every dollar you spent, every suit you wore was paid for with Viltori blood. My father watched his brothers die while your father laughed. You are the fruit of a poisoned tree, Dante, and I was sent to chop it down." "So that's it?" Dante grabbed her wrist. 5 years of marriage, the laughs, the nights we spent talking until sunrise. All fake? All a job? Serafina's breath hitched. She looked at his hand on her wrist, then back at his face. "Not all of it," she whispered, almost sadly. "That was the problem. I wasn't supposed to hesitate." "Hesitate? I could have killed you in your sleep 100 times, Dante. I could have poisoned your wine. I could have cut your brakes. But I didn't. I divorced you. I took your money. I left you alive. You left me to be executed by Kovac. I tipped off the feds to raid the factory 5 minutes after the Kovac team arrived," she argued. "I sent the cavalry, you idiot. I tried to have you arrested so you'd be safe in federal custody. I didn't think you'd be stupid enough to try and fight your way out." Dante stared at her. She had tried to have him arrested to save him from being murdered. It was a twisted, messed up form of mercy. "Why?" Dante asked. Serafina looked down at her stomach. Because I didn't want my child's father to be murdered. I just wanted him neutralized. My child's father. The confirmation hung in the air. It was his. Dante, you have to go, Serafina said, her voice urgent now. Silas, he doesn't know I hesitated. If he finds you here, he won't stop. He's loyal to the Viltori oath, not to me. I'm not leaving you, Dante said, his grip tightening. Not with him. Not with my son. Your son? A cold voice rasped from the doorway. Dante spun around. Silas stood there. The waiter's mess was wiped off his jacket. In his hand was a suppressed pistol, leveled directly at Dante's chest. Let her go, Russo, Silas said, his eyes dead and shark-like. You've caused enough damage. Silas, don't! Serafina stepped between them, shielding Dante with her body. Move, Serafina, Silas commanded. The mission is scorched earth. No survivors. That was the order from your father. My father is dead, she screamed. But his orders aren't, Silas replied. He adjusted his aim, trying to find a line of sight past her pregnant form. You went soft, Serafina. You fell in love with the mark. I told the council this would happen. The council? Dante frowned. What council? The syndicate isn't just one family, Dante, Silas sneered. It's a board of directors, and they just voted to terminate your bloodline, permanently. Silas raised the gun to Serafina's shoulder, preparing to shoot through her to get to Dante if he had to. I said move, Silas barked. Dante saw the muscle in Silas's jaw twitch. He knew that look. It was the look of a man who had stopped thinking and started executing. Dante didn't go for his gun. He wouldn't be fast enough. Instead, he did the only thing that could save her. He grabbed Serafina and threw himself backward, pulling her with him over the low stone railing of the balcony. Dante! She screamed. They plummeted off the terrace, falling 20 feet into the dark, freezing waters of Lake Como below, just as Silas's bullets chipped the stone where they had been standing. The freezing water of Lake Como knocked the wind out of Dante. He gripped Serafina tight, dragging her deep into the darkness as Silas's bullets cut white trails through the surface above. They surfaced under the rotting wood of the boathouse dock, gasping for air in the shadows. Quiet, Dante hissed, pressing her against the mossy wall. Above them, heavy footsteps echoed on the wood. They went under. Silas's voice drifted down, cold and detached. Sweep the perimeter. If they surface, shoot them. Dante waited until the footsteps faded before breaking the lock on the maintenance hatch. They collapsed onto the dry floor of the storage room, shivering violently. Dante wrapped his soaked tuxedo jacket around Serafina. Why? She trembled, clutching her pregnant belly. You could have run. Why did you jump? And leave my child with a psychopath? Dante spat, wringing out his shirt. Silas said the council voted to terminate the bloodline. That includes the baby, Serafina. Serafina looked away, shame coloring her pale features. I didn't know. Silas promised me that once the Russos were destroyed, I would be free. He never said he'd kill the child. You were the loose end, Dante realized. You hold the Black Ledger. Did you really think they'd let you walk away with their secrets? I just wanted revenge, she whispered, tears mixing with the lake water on her face, for my father. But not like this. Not at the cost of my son. Suddenly the door creaked. Dante lunged for a rusty fishing knife, shielding Serafina with his body. Easy, boss. It's me. Lucas stepped out of the shadows, dripping wet, holding a sniper rifle wrapped in plastic. Lucas! Dante breathed, lowering the weapon. How did you find us? Thermal scope, Lucas chattered. Saw the heat signatures. We have to move. Silas has a boat circling the point. Running is useless. Dante shook his head grimly. Silas has satellite tracking and an army. If we run, we're just delaying the inevitable. We need to cut off the head. The council, Serafina said, standing up. Her fear was replaced by the cold resolve of the spy she was trained to be. The council is just a digital board, but Silas answers to one man, the chairman. Who is he? Dante asked. You know him, Dante. He was at your wedding. She took a deep breath. Senator Corvus. Dante staggered back. Corvus was his godfather, the most powerful politician in New York, the man who had helped Dante build his legitimacy. He played us both, Serafina explained. He used the Russo to control the unions and the Viltores to clean the mess. Now he wants to wipe the slate clean for his presidential run. No witnesses. Rage burned in Dante's chest. He had lost his money, his reputation, and almost his family, all for the ambition of a man he trusted. "Where is he?" Dante asked. "He's hosting a summit at his private chalet in the Swiss Alps," Serafina said. "Silas will be heading there to report our deaths." Dante turned to Lucas. "Can you fly a helicopter?" "Boss, I can fly a bathtub if it has an engine." Lucas grinned weakly. "Good." Dante looked at Serafina. "You're staying here. It's too dangerous." "No." She stepped forward, eyes blazing. "I know the security codes. I'm the only way you get close to Corvus. We do this together." Dante looked at her, wet, shivering, but fierce. He realized he hadn't just married a pretty face. He had married a partner. "Okay," Dante nodded. "We finish this tonight." The blizzard howled around the Chalet Edelweiss, a fortress perched high in the Swiss Alps. Above the ridge, the stolen medical helicopter bucked violently in the wind. "I can't land!" Lucas screamed over the headset. "You have to jump!" Dante didn't hesitate. He grabbed Serafina's hand. "Together!" They leaped into the waist-deep powder, just as the helicopter banked away into the whiteout. Dressed in white tactical gear, they moved like ghosts, breaching the chalet's side door before the sensors could reboot. Inside, the main hall was warm and silent. Senator Corvus sat in a leather armchair by the roaring fire, swirling a glass of brandy. He didn't turn around. "I expected Silas to bring me bodies," Corvus said calmly. "Not guests." Dante stepped into the light, leveling his MP5 at the back of the senator's head. "It's over, Corvus. We know you're the chairman." Corvus chuckled, turning his chair. "Dante, my boy. You think a gun gives you power? I own the judges. I own the Senate. I used the Russos to control the unions and the Viltores to clean up the mess. Now I'm wiping the slate clean for my presidential run." "Silas!" Corvus barked. "End them." The shadows shifted. Silas stepped out, his weapon raised. But he wasn't aiming at Dante. He was aiming at Corvus. The room froze. "What is this?" Corvus demanded, his face reddening. "I pay your salary." "I checked the archives," Silas said, his voice cold and hollow. He was bleeding heavily from his side, his face pale. Serafina was right. The order to purge the Viltore family 20 years ago. "It has your signature, Senator. You sold out my Don." "It was business," Corvus screamed. "Blood is forever," Silas whispered. Bang! A single shot echoed. Senator Corvus slumped back, a bullet in his forehead. The brandy glass shattered on the floor. Silas lowered his gun, sliding down the wall as his strength finally gave out. "The contract is void," he wheezed, looking at Serafina's stomach. "The Viltore we don't forget." His eyes closed. The ghost was finally at rest. Dante and Serafina stood in the silence. The Empire was decapitated. "What now?" Serafina asked, trembling. Dante handed her Corvus's master laptop. "Delete us. Dante and Serafina Russo die in these mountains tonight," Serafina typed furiously. Within minutes, code scrolled across the screen, erasing marriage licenses, tax records, and warrants. They were no longer fugitives. They were nothing. "It's done," she whispered. "We're ghosts." Dante took her hand, leaving the millions of dollars in assets to burn with the corrupt legacy of their families. "Let's go home." 6 months later. The sun set over a modest, nameless vineyard in Tuscany. Far from the noise of New York, the air smelled of earth and grapes. A man worked the vines, his hands stained with soil, his face tanned and free of stress. "Luca, dinner!" "Sì, detest." A woman called from the stone cottage. Dante, now Luca, walked up the porch steps. Serafina sat there, holding a baby boy wrapped in a blue blanket. She looked radiant, softer than she ever had in the penthouse. Dante kissed her and looked down at his son. They had no money. They had no soldiers. But as the baby grasped his finger, Dante knew he had won the only game that mattered. He had cheated death and the law, but he would never cheat on her again. And that is how Dante and Serafina Russo burned their world down to build a new one from the ashes. It makes you wonder, if you found out your entire relationship was a setup, could you forgive your partner to save your life? I want to know what you would do. If you were Dante, would you have saved Serafina at the lake? Let me know your verdict in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button and subscribe so you never miss the next saga. Thanks for watching.